let's talk about the other sophomore receiver in this class. And to me, he's the biggest enigma of the group, and that's Jayden Thomas. The reason I say that is we have just seen so little of Jaden the last 2 years. He didn't earn a single snap last year. And I thought he was going to play in the bowl game because I kept hearing from people, oh, Jayden Thomas is the best receiver they have right now in practice and all this. And then they don't play him, which I didn't understand. But that's why I just sometimes tend to take what I hear from practice with a grain of salt, in regard to bowl practice, I should say.
Yeah.
And then he comes out in the spring and we're hearing all this stuff about how good he looks in the winter. And then we get to the practices that are open and just didn't see a whole lot, right? Just didn't show a whole lot, had a couple drops, just didn't look really dynamic. Then we get to the spring game and he looks like a completely different guy. And the reason he's hard to evaluate is because I liked Jaden when Notre Dame landed him and because off of his junior film, he was a really good player. He could do things after the catch. He was a guy that showed some ability to stretch the field. He was a center fielder in baseball. He's a guy who could really move. He wasn't a burner, but he's really athletic.
Yeah.
Then his senior year, he plays almost the whole year with turf toe, which if you've never had turf toe, it's really painful. And it's really hard you can't be explosive with turf toe. It's just whether or not you can play with the pain or not. And that's why it's really hard for skill players. It's like Chris Tyree. I mean, you just plant on the foot. It's like hitting the gas in your car and just nothing happens, right? It's just not going to happen. Your car goes from, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. Well, then you get turf toe and it goes from 0 to 60 in like 9 seconds, right? It's just like to create an analogy of you just have no juice. And that's what Jaden was playing with his whole senior year. Now, number one, kudos to playing as much as he did with that injury. And then number two, but it makes it hard to okay, well, what is Jaden? We didn't see him. He actually regressed as a senior simply because of the injury, right? Not that he regressed like he wasn't as good or, wasn't as talented. He got stiff in the hips. He, wasn't trying hard. It's just, he regressed from a productiveness standpoint because of an injury that was outside of his control. And then we come out, we don't see him as a freshman. So like, he's sort of that, and that's kind of the thing I think with Dion is there's all this excitement about Jayden Thomas and people saying, well, he's going to be this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, based on what? What have you seen from Jayden Thomas to make you say that, right? Well, you've seen Dion, and now he's kind of the guy you can pick apart. So take away that aspect of it, which I think is a little silly because then it comes across like I'm tearing down Jaden. It's not it at all.
Sure.
But here's what I will say. If Jayden Thomas can go into the season and be the guy that he was in the spring game, that's going to answer ease so many concerns about this receiving core. Because the thing I like about him, Ryan, he's a very unique player on this roster. Yep. He's probably got the second best size of all the returners, right? 6'1.5", 215 pounds. He's a thick kid. He's got some height to him. Good catch radius, not elite, but it's good. It's better than some of the smaller guys. But he's surprisingly nimble for his size. And we saw that in the spring game, which – part of it was a good play by him, and the other part of it was a terrible play by Ramon Henderson. But that juke that he had of Ramon to kind of shake him up, and that's stuff we've heard about him doing in practice that we've never seen him do in practice. So he showed something to where it's like, okay, with his unique body type, the reality is, Ryan, I think he can play all three positions in this offense.
Yep.
Getting a guy like that brings some size, some after the catch, and there's nothing he's great at, in my opinion. But he's just kind of got a really nice all-around game. He's got a natural feel for football that when you put all that together and his versatility, he's like a utility infielder, and I mean that in the most complimentary fashion possible. Not like he's a guy that you're bringing to pinch hit in the ninth inning or, bringing as a defensive sub. What I mean is that it's like more of like a Pete Rose type, where Pete Rose, like where was Pete Rose? Should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame? I believe he should be. The question then would be, okay, but where? Third base, first base, left field, like he played all over. He could, and that's kind of Jayden Thomas. If you need him in the boundary, he can play in the boundary. If you need him in the slot, he can play the slot. If you need him into the field, he can play the field. That's so important to be able to have a guy that can be a backup at all those different positions. And I think that's more than anything what I'm hoping we see from Jaden. And then beyond that, if he can just be an effective rotation player at all those positions, anything beyond that would be just a bonus, in my opinion.
I'm sorry. I'm stuck a little bit on, and this is awesome. I thank you for this so much, but I have Jayden Thomas as the Pete Rose of Notre Dame wide receivers. I love it, man.
Hey, you know what? I'm a Reds fan. And hey, aren't you a Phillies fan?
I am a Phillies fan.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
he won
So,
a World
hey,
Series with the
man,
Phillies.
I got nothing against Charlie Hustle, man. He was a great player. All right. Got nothing against him. But to your point, though, Brian, one way that you can eliminate some depth issues is to have guys that can do multiple things, right?
Right.
To have a guy that can play
Go.
all over the place, right? That kind of alleviates a little bit of that stress because now you don't have to have a 3 deep with guys that just are W's, just are slots, just are to the field. Like you can have a guy
Mhm.
now that if you're down a player in the slot, let's say, Jaden, go play the slot. If someone's, a little nicked up in the W, Jaden, I need you to go out there and give me some reps at W, right? Like
Right.
that's what I think Jayden Thomas can provide you. I think that he is, I don't want to call him depth because I think he can play, right? Like I
Right.
saw him in the spring game and I'm like, the kid
Depth
can
is important.
contribute.
To us, depth is not an
Yes.
insult at a position
No.
like this. People need to
Yeah.
understand that.
I,
Yes.
I don't want people to hear it as I'm saying that he's just a depth piece and he's not going to contribute at all, right? Like he's insurance. He's not insurance. I think he can play football. And like to your point, he's a guy that can do a little bit after the catch. He has some sleekness to him as a route runner. He kind of takes you a little bit by surprise. I think
Yeah.
that he honestly remote like again, it was a bad tackle attempt by Ramon on the reverse or whatever it was, right? The end around, but he has a little bit of this like weird kind of style that
Yeah.
Jaden brings to the game where he kind of takes you off guard a little bit. He's
Yeah.
got a little craftiness to him, I guess,
Right.
if you want to phrase it like that. So I think that he can help with the depth because I think that he can play multiple spots to your degree, and I think he can contribute. I think one thing that I've seen from him is he is one of the more sure-handed pass catchers that I saw at least live, where I didn't see any issues with fighting the football or double
Right.
catches or anything like that. He was a pretty consistent pass catcher. So if he can give you consistency and he can give you alignment versatility, then that's a huge bonus for this team
Right.
that does not have great depth. They just
Right.
don't.
And we're not saying he may start. He may win a starting job.
Sure.
That's not what we're referring to. I honestly feel like he's better not starting. Because if you start him, it somewhat narrows him into a spot a little bit where I kind of want to see. Sometimes, you want a guy to be a master of something, right? Sometimes, however, the need of your team is I don't really care as much in 2022 about Jaden becoming a master of the X, Z, or Y or W. I care more about him being a jack of all trades. You know what I mean? And normally that's not the case. But in this instance, because of the lack of depth, because we don't know about Joe Wilkins' health, we don't know about Avery Davis's health. Like if Avery gets hurt again or can't play early, you're almost then forcing Lorenzo Styles to be almost a full-time slot. That's not in to me a situation that I really I'm super comfortable with. Okay. But if you have a guy like Jayden Thomas who can then also step in and give you some slot reps, then you can maybe use Lorenzo in other positions. So that's kind of where I look at it, where he brings such great value to what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that can contribute, but also give you insurance at multiple spots, right? Like that's very rare. I mean, like usually a guy is a contributor and he's just a contributor at one spot, or he's a guy that's just going to fill in the back and be a backup W or backup whatever. But Jayden Thomas, I think he could do a little bit of both for you. So I actually think the floor on Jaden's pretty high, right? Like I don't know if the ceiling's as high as like a Deion Colsey is, for instance. I mean, I know it's not, in my opinion, anyway. But the floor is something that's really interesting and something that you need. And I think that Jaden can provide that to you. He can give you the consistency and the feeling of comforts, knowing
Mhm.
that he's on the roster and he can do a variety of things for you as well.